each week, I guess not every week now, but each episode, we do a little deep dive on a poet, and we each choose a poem to analyze. And my name's Justin,
I'm James.
and this week we're doing. I keep on saying week. We kind of moved to a bi-weekly schedule here for those of you just joining us. But this episode we're doing William Blake.
William Blake, a mystic, a poet, an
Yeah,
artist.
yeah, a prophet, you know, perhaps.
I've really enjoyed reading and learning about William Blake.
Mhm, mhm.
He he's they call him a proto romantic because I
Yeah,
guess he kind of like he sort of calls forth the romantic era. But what I kind of like most about his poetry is how sort of passionate he is in his
mhm,
poetry, how much
mhm,
heart he shows.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
in a time where a lot of people were sort of, I guess, a bit more buttoned up, especially in England, him being
Yeah,
an English poet.
yeah, yeah. His is does come across, I was gonna say, a bit of innocence, it's kind of childlike. Of course, he had the songs of innocence, that we'll kinda get into, but, his poetry did come across, or does kind of come across almost the I guess innocence is the best word, almost this kind of, um it's not pretentious. It reaches, it has like a bit of whimsy,
Mm,
and there is, he's reaching towards like kind of a supernatural state, um, which he just kind of had this like incredible sort of belief. He's kind of seen as a bit of a madman during his time, because he'd be talking to spirits, and um there's like even maybe I don't know if there's even some debate. Pretty much people believe that he believed in these visions that he saw. And that kind of takes a certain amount of, I guess, kind of faith, that we don't really see it. If someone told you that today, you'd be like, all right, this guy's out of his mind. I mean, and they felt the way at the time, but, he's kind
right.
of rare in that, he kinda stuck with that, and I guess time, kind of made him out to be, I guess, right in a way, kind of vindicated?
Time indeed was kind to William Blake, and
Yes,
he
yeah,
um and he was he did have a like innocence, a definitely an innocence, a quality of innocence to his poetry, but also contrasted with the songs of innocence were his songs of experience. But even as he would write about sort of a more experienced point of view of the world, that experienced point of view would include a sympathetic eye towards even like children, like
mhm,
child laborers,
mhm,
and even animals, and
mhm,
women as well.
mhm,
So children, women, animals, these William Blake was a guy that was sympathetic to these sorts of individuals, and he viewed like his experience of the world. He did not allow it to jade his point of view. Um,
mm,
William Blake, he sort of maintained a sort of whimsy, a sort of happiness, like you
mhm,
said, and
mhm,
so
yeah,
William Blake is a soul that has suffered, but is not necessarily. He's not. He maybe he's hurt. He has been hurt, but he's not
yeah,
like damaged.
he's not tortured,
He's not. Yeah, he's not tortured.
right,
There's a lot of light-hearted,
mhm,
well-meaning,
mhm,
well-intentioned
mhm.
messages in William Blake's poetry.
Right, right. Whereas, a little bit later romantic who also had Gothic influence, Edgar Allan Poe, that, we at the show are big fans of. He's more of the tortured, kind of romantic, where, with William Blake kind of being like a proto-romantic, he's still romantic in the sense of, believing in like kind of like romantic love, um, which he, had for his wife, and even had kind of more, open, or I guess, you could say liberal or progressive views on sex, and on having, he'd be in a probably a polygamous marriage right now if he lived in our time, or he'd be polyamory. Like that was like he kind of advocated for open sort of sexuality, um, and
He often would talk about the church, and the church being something that sort of bound his desires,
hmm
or sort of
hmm
stifled
yeah.
his proclivities.
Yes, yeah. So he was also an individual, kind of that individualistic. He never, as far I'm fairly certain, he was never officially a member of any church. But also was someone who was, a mystic, and uh, spoke to Ezekiel, and even and wrote very prophetic books, like his books that, had like Urizen, and like Orc, and those characters where, he was kind of dealing with, the kind of like high level sort of um, revelations,
He was almost dealing with ideations of the unconscious in a time
yes, yeah,
before Sigmund
hmm
Freud, before
yeah, yeah,
people could even think like, oh, is this from my subconscious mind or my
hmm
unconscious
hmm
mind? He was
hmm
almost sort of gesturing towards that,
hmm hmm
before modern psychology.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and like Urizen kind of also represents almost like the Pharisees in a way, because like he's like the rule giver, and like the one who, like he like follows rules, and is sort of like the like even horizon, like the end of like man's like sight,
Mm.
um kind of almost like all you can see, kind of being more like materialistic, um, in the sense, not just like materialistic as in like, I like to go to the mall and go shopping, but like materialistic as in like believing that what matters and all that's here is the material or what we can see, like this
Mm.
is like, the material life is real,
Right.
um, which for Blake, he kind of was more of a metaphysical, um, kind of person, or personality. um, so I think like you said, he's kind of dealing with like ideas, like high level ideas, things that are like in the subconscious, in personalities, like, and turning them into um like kind of characters, or like even like little, like gods almost.
He was sort of Jungian in that way, you
hmm
know.
hmm
And it's kind of interesting, there's this idea that there's some sort of there are beings or creatures, beneath the sea, or sort of
hmm
under the
hmm
ground, or sort of
hmm
behind the curtain, or
hmm
that there's a realm that maybe through art, or that we can sort of push into, because and Blake was actually early enough to sort of push back against some of the science of the day, some of the
hmm
emerging science that was coming out,
right.
in a time where people were feeling more and more confident about man's place at the apex of the world.
hmm
William Blake sought to challenge that and say, no, there are things above us, around us, that
hmm
are
hmm
adding to the mystery of our existence.
hmm hmm Right, yeah, and then that's, him being sort of immaterial, like, with the science coming from like a positive philosophy, like positive as in like asserting um the validity of like existence, like saying like making a positive assertion, like yes, this does exist, the universe is something real that can be explored and explained, um and kind of like tried, and um so yeah, and that he was kind of against that. More of the intangible, immaterial. You know, saying that he'd say, no, you can't know, rather than like yes, you can know, or
Right,
so. Which also being in romantic uh, literature, art, going against industrialization,
right.
and being kind of a response to it.
not only in ideology, as in intimations of the unconscious, but also in the practicalities of his work by attacking child labor practices.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you
Yeah,
mentioned going
yeah.
against industrialization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
His critiques of child labor practices being barbaric, that is like a physical, concrete way to sort of, you know, go against some of these institutions that were developing at the time.
Yeah. It's kind of, yeah, he's been a fun one to read and to kind of get back, 'cause I read him a few years ago. It's been a couple years, so kind of, these last 2 weeks, just doing like a deep dive back into William Blake and reading him again has been a bit, s- kind of rejuvenating to me in some regards.
This notion is thrown around as though there are these poets that we should read, like,
Uh-huh.
but William Blake is a poet where several of his poems are, like, I would almost say, like English language poems. They
Hmm.
almost should be read. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if you're interested in English poetry at all, I mean, even especially, like, this isn't a poem that we're doing, but to highlight the tiger, they say that
Hmm.
is the most anthologized poem in
Mm-hmm.
English
Hmm.
language, and
Hmm. Hmm.
it has very famous opening lines, and
Burning bright.
that this is a kind of the type of poet that we're dealing with. This poet's definitely contributed to the English canon. Even just through reading his poems, I remember him from school. I remember
Right,
from
right.
school. I remember him from just like, your teacher may hand out pamphlets, and you might not do the all, like, some parts of the pamphlet you might not even get to. The teacher might be like, "Oh, we're not going over that part," but that part may include like some stuff about William Blake. Or
Hmm.
he was always sort of around. He was
Yeah.
never too far away.
Yep, yep. And even as a visual artist, he's he gets a lot of credit for being, possibly, England's greatest poet. But he's also a great, visual artist and had quite made, a contribution to art in that regard too. So if he
Yeah.
he did both, and if he had just done one or the other, he'd still be considered, one of the greats. Um, which,
We got we have
we're
a
only
Deion
talking about the
Sanders
literature
type guy
here.
on those hands right
Yeah,
here.
right. Yeah, yeah. This guy played both sides of the ball.
And now both sides of the ball, even
Yeah.
two sports.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, this guy was the Bo Jackson of
Right.
Deion Sanders did it too, but um and he wasn't like Michael Jordan, okay? It wasn't like he just got on the, double A, Chicago team, just, because of who he was. Um but
but but those illusions were just his prowess, his artistic prowess.
mhm, yes.
He wasn't actually successful in life.
No. But
You-
that's fine. No, but I mean,
right.
that depends on how you measure success, of course.
But
Um,
he actually said that he's sort of writing for a, I think the term he used was chorus of the ages. I
mm,
think he said he was writing for a chorus of the ages, or a choir of the
mm,
ages, or something like
mm,
that.
mm,
So he had an eye for the infinite, an eye for
mhm,
the for the distant future.
yeah. And I think with that, that mean we could probably have an infinite conversation about 'em, but we probably get to the poems.
Right.
You wanna do some dig a little deeper here? You wanna go first, or did you go
I
first
think
last
I
time?
went first last week. I'd go
Okay,
first
okay.
again, unless
I
you
could
want
go
to.
first.
All
I
right.
could go first. You know what? I'm gonna attempt something here. I'm doing Infant Sorrow, by the way, for our audience. Um, I think I have this one memorized. So I'm gonna I'm gonna try it. Maybe I shouldn't have announced that before, but
Well, for the sake
inf
of the audience,
yeah,
it's on the screen
it
nonetheless.
is, it is. So Infant Sorrow by William Blake. My mother groaned, my father wept. Into the dangerous world I leapt, helpless, naked, piping loud, like a fiend hid in a cloud, struggling in my father's hands, striving against my swaddling bands. Bound and weary, I thought best to sulk upon my mother's breast. So that's a it's one of my favorites. Obviously that's why I chose it. When we were talking about William Blake 2 weeks ago, I knew immediately I'm gonna do Infant Sorrow. I don't but because I had actually memorized this one a couple years ago. Um, I was just practicing memorizing poems. But this one, you go ahead. You wanna give some initial thoughts on it? Some initial, you know,
You know,
reactions?
my initial reactions are, what a beautiful illustration of a of the plight of sort of a young baby.
Hmm.
We all
Hmm.
imagine sort of, the crying of the baby when it's born and fighting it, dealing with fussy babies. So, it's almost a good, perfect little snapshot of the life of the time of a baby maybe not having such a good time.
I feel like this is like almost a near perfect poem. Um, in the sense that it is an accurate depiction of a human experience. Every human born into this world has done this, like this is literally true for all people, like on a physical plane, like this happens. And then also with this poem you could take you can go 2 3 steps further, right?
Mm,
um because I mean we are born into a dangerous world, right? We are, it's true, we are helpless, we are naked, we're screaming, like a fiend hid in a cloud, um we're like this little, and he used often, especially in songs of experience and of innocence, describing us as a cloud,
mm,
sort of. And if you think of like the soul, like almost like the sun being behind the clouds, um, and us kind of being this like, I don't know, this thing, like the sun, the soul's this thing that's powering us. We're just like clouds passing in front of it, right?
right,
That kind of give us shape in the moment. So now fiend, this little, a little baby is like, I mean, these things are little terrorizers, uh,
right.
you know, um, but, you know, taking it a step further, my mother groaned, my father wept. I mean, it's incredible, his mother, the pain, of bringing him into his world, his father, it's almost like his father weeping, that almost has this intangibility to it,
Mm,
um and so you think, mother earth, father time, you have this play here of sort of masculine and feminine, where the mother and father kind of represent that. So this, he's brought into this dangerous world, he's struggling in his father's hands, almost like, the father, the masculine, kind of rules, you know he's struggling against his,
society
yes,
hierarchy.
society, yes, yeah, yeah, all that, striving against my swaddling bands. Swaddling bands are like, when they wrap a baby
Hmm.
around, you can just see him just struggling in this world. He's born in this dangerous world, he's fighting against it, you know bound and weary, just, almost, you almost succumb to it. Bound and weary, I thought best to sulk upon my mother's breast. And you have that even with, in like Acts with like Paul, talking about, you have spiritual milk, and, he, like kind of, just this suckling, child, just, taking basically the material world, what he can get from it, his little material, I guess, enjoyments or whatever, because almost, to only fight and struggle again.
Right.
That's what I feel like the implication is, like he's gonna go right back to struggling and striving once he's, taking a nap,
This is all to me. This is almost. I feel like the reason it's called infant sorrow is because it's like it's almost like the hero's journey, but it ends in the underworld, sort of,
mm, mm,
it sort of ends in bed with the goddess. Like you're struggling, you're fighting, you're doing these things, and then you have this moment of reprieve.
yeah,
That's sort of like a tragic tale. Stories that sort of end with everybody giving up or dying. Those are sort of known as tragedies.
mm,
So
mm,
like I mean,
mm.
it's sort of
Yeah,
a
yeah,
it, it's
that's good too.
it's sort of a light tragedy.
Mm-hmm,
The
mm-hmm.
baby defeated,
Yes,
swaddled, bound,
yes. Mm-hmm. Yep, yeah.
just lays down
Uh-huh,
and gives in to the
uh-huh,
softness of his mother's breast.
uh-huh.
This pattern
Yes.
is the pattern that creates us as human beings. This,
Uh-huh.
dad takes us out, whips us around a little bit,
Mm-hmm,
then we run back to mom.
mm-hmm,
That
mm-hmm,
dichotomy. There's something
mm-hmm.
in that dichotomy,
Right,
that back and forth.
right.
And that back and forth, this is brilliance. This is where, again, this is a part where the poetry really starts to really crackle and sizzle.
Mm-hmm,
We're
mm-hmm,
talking about that dichotomy. It's illustrated in the text. Mother
mm-hmm.
groaned, father
Yes,
wept.
yes, yes.
um you know
Yep. Mm-hmm.
uh into the dangers, leaping into the
Yes.
dangerous world, but striving within the
Mm-hmm.
father's hands,
Right. Yes. Yeah.
but then sulking on the mother's breast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
this di- eh, oh, I'm sorry, Justin, I didn't mean to
no, no,
step on
keep.
your toe.
You're good.
I
You're
was just
good.
going to say this dichotomy is evidence not only in this text, but in the larger canon, Infant Sorrow.
Mm-hmm.
This
Mm-hmm.
poem is complemented by another William Blake poem, Infant Joy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
Yeah.
these sorts of dichotomies, we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
It'll show again in the poem I'm doing, but this dichotomy is also canonically expressed not only in the two poems, not only in the poem itself, but also in the songs of innocence and the songs of
Mm-hmm.
experience. So
Right. Yep.
we have this dichotomy fractaling out.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
almost
This.
biblical.
Yeah. 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 I mean, you have the same with the in the Bible. Old and New Testament, from society to the individual. Um, and this is a small, a microcosm of William Blake's work as a whole, as you're kind of illustrating. um and I do like that it is, it's infant sorrow, it is the infant being defeated, right? And it's, you know the struggling in his father's hands, like, he got taken out, he did get a little freedom, his dad took him out into, away from his mother, and he couldn't handle it, he's fighting, trying to, fighting in his dad's hands. Because of that, then he is put into the swaddling bands. They wrapped him down, now he's fighting again. They're like, all right, let's just calm this guy down. And then, he is, because he did not win, he did not succeed, otherwise he would be out in freedom, he couldn't handle what little freedom he was given. you know but and of course, as time goes on, he'll be given more and more or less. And that is kind of like almost even a microcosm of our relationship with, you know our heavenly father. um and how
Earthly
often we go back.
pleasures.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. um so, I mean, that's the great thing about poetry, right? You can have this human experience, give it almost, and just by paying attention to minute details, we can have a cosmic, almost, uh maybe perception, or view of it, right? And
Experience.
yeah, and then we can apply it to our own lives. We can see how it's affected us, maybe those around us. Now we can see the world with new eyes.
Right, right. And you know, William Blake, he's definitely has these this he's in commune with the spiritual world, and he's a man of visions and has these insights. It's almost fitting that in some ways duality is almost the first one of the first levels of spirituality and sort of spiritual sort of experience. I mean, even in art, music, they
Uh-huh.
talk about
Uh-huh.
tension and release.
Yeah.
Con
Mhm.
that tension and release is more of a musical term, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's a poetic term as well. But
Mhm,
then there's
mhm,
also contrast in art,
mhm,
contrast of
mhm,
light and
mhm.
shadows. So
We and, you know, also to jump on that, it does this with the iams, right? Because these are four,
Mm,
it's 8 lines,
right.
it's 2 lines of four. Each one kind of show, the stanzas are kind, sort of contrasted with each other. The iams within, my mother groaned, my father wept. It's four iams on each line. And uh and you have two couplets, right, that are, you know, so, my mother groaned, my father wept, into the dangerous world I leapt, A. And then
Mm-hmm.
contrasted with helpless, naked, piping loud, like a fiend hid in a cloud. And it's almost kind of mathematical, how you got two, when you kind of break it down like that, it can almost, and that is when poetry gets stale, right? It becomes formulaic.
Mm,
It's heavily reliant on on the form, and then people are doing things that are unnatural within the form to fit the form rather than fitting the poem. This is where I feel like he's nailed it because he's right at the highest level of form. You know,
right.
I mean, he's basically painting with primary colors here, and or like this is like playing in a uh what is it? Is it I'm blanking on it, pentatonic scale? He's
Mm-hmm.
playing on a pentatonic scale right now. Everything works together.
It's like a simple 5 note scale. There, it
Hmm.
is very
Yeah,
simple. Like
yeah,
this, this same format could be used in a poem about ducks and
hmm hmm
geese on a farm or something. You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
just simple
yeah,
AABB CCDD.
yeah.
You
I
know,
mean,
if if there was a poetry writing class, you'd basically go over this. What, day one?
yeah.
AABBCCDD.
Yeah, but it's also like it's divisible by two, right? It's
Right,
da dum, da dum. It's four
right.
da dums on each line,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going it's 8 lines. Divide that by two. It's four each. Divide
Right.
that by two. You got two iams or two
Mm,
couplets.
right.
And you go down to two, it's that contrast, this contrast, the mother and the father, you know um or even the child, between freedom and submission, um
Mm. So what you sounds like you're saying, even the very beats of the I am
yes, 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 yes,
give us a dichotomous
yes,
experience.
right, yeah,
And you are correct. Yeah, I feel
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. And so just as you like, the poem itself is like a microcosm of his
Work in a
work.
greater work. Yeah.
We could
Yep.
take it even further to where that da da, this
The poem itself
female
is a
female,
microcosm of
this,
sound.
that sound, or even the dichotomy, the duality that we live in between male, female, material, immaterial. um and that, this is like touching the just, the getting to the bone of it, the root of it.
I mean, if you want to talk about cosmic symbolism, this is the pyramid
Hmm.
with the eye, floating
Hmm.
eye on top,
Hmm.
because it's at the top of several pyramids, really. It's like a
Hmm.
meta pyramid.
Hmm. Hmm.
The eye on top is like a pyramid about pyramids. It's a meta
Mhm,
pyramid,
mhm, mhm, mhm,
so this the rhythm of this poem is almost about rhythm. The poem is almost about poetry. It's a human experience about humanity. Um, this is why our species sort of evolved cosmic symbols so that we can sort of talk about metaphysical realities.
mhm, mhm.
So,
Yeah, I mean and yeah, I mean essentially every symbol is an abstraction of truth, right? Or of a actual concrete experience, and this is a concrete experience abstracted.
hey, I mean, this is. I mean, and we've been going over songs of experience, songs of innocence. Over the last 2 weeks, I texted Justin like, bro, this poetry is so great. We're gonna have to go with more contemporary poets
Right? Yeah, we gotta change. Yeah,
just to
it's an
even change.
embarrassment of riches.
What can even be said?
Right, right.
We've said it. I mean, this is the glowing eye on top of the pyramid, guys. I
Hmm.
mean, but
Yeah,
yeah, so
it's like yeah, you're like that old professor, you got like a class of like just like kids, you know, zoned out, not paying attention, some sleep
oh
with their
right,
heads on the
right,
desk.
right,
Like, guys, this
yeah,
is exciting stuff here. Okay, this
yeah, yeah,
guy's,
yeah.
I mean, he's touching on the very fabric of existence. I mean, are we? I need some. Is anyone awake? Can I get some feedback? I mean, are we?
Right.
Yeah.
But just to to spur those that may want to read
Hmm.
poetry.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I think William Blake is like a great place to start because it's not like it's John Ashbery or it's not like it's like stuff that you're like, I don't know what the hell I'm reading here. I don't
Right.
understand this. Like you're going to understand William Blake and you
On
can.
some level.
Right, exactly. Right. This is at the very least this is a poem about a baby being
Right.
born.
And
Like
just being doing baby stuff.
yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, you could even, take
If
it to
one
like
were
original sin or something like that. I don't know, with the pain that the mother feels and, having the child and now how we're sort of doomed to suffering. You know, there are different angles that you could take this from.
right, there definitely is. And hey, great poem. Infant
Hmm.
sorrow. It's almost
Yeah.
like the tragedy of the infant.
Hmm.
The infant and the mother and father are represent the dichotomies of the world for the young infant.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, and
Yeah.
there's
And hey, like I did at the beginning, I memorized it. This is a good poem to memorize because it's just so song-like. That's what
right.
I really love about William Blake. And I mentioned to James throughout the week or the last 2 weeks that, it kind of reminded me how much I just enjoy songs. Like I love music. I love listening to music, but I enjoy like songs. I've always judged music based on, well, I haven't always, but when I was younger, I always judged music based off the song by the words they were saying. So, um, this is song like nearly all of his poetry is.
Yeah. So
Yeah, but yeah, let's get to
would you want to read it again just to close us out?
sure. Infant sorrow. My mother groaned, my father wept. Into the dangerous world I leapt, helpless, naked, piping loud, like a fiend hid in a cloud, struggling in my father's hands, striving against my swaddling bands. Bound and weary, I thought best to sulk upon my mother's breast.
All right.
There we go. William
Infant
Blake.
Sorrow
Yep.
by William Blake.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm sorry, I want to say one more thing.
No problem.
For those of you who are familiar with, Get Him to the Greek and um, what's the other one?
Um
It's not I Love You,
uh
Man. Oh,
yeah,
Forgetting
no.
Sarah Marshall.
Right, right, right.
Infant Sorrow is the name of Russell Brand's band. It is, sort of uh, influenced by William Blake. I watched those movies when I was in high school, right? When I was like 16. I knew William Blake, didn't know the Infant Sorrow poem. Discovered the Infant Sorrow poem when I was like 21 or 22. The initial draw is because of the band, because of the movies, right? But it turned
Mhm.
out that that poem was just so great and so fantastic that the poem itself just took over.
Right. All
So
right.
yeah,
Hey.
that's what I just wanted to throw that out there. A little pop culture reference.
And I forgot that I did think that, like, but I forgot to mention that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's pretty good movies. But
Hmm. Yeah. Pretty fun.
the poem that I decided to do was a poison tree
Yes.
by William Blake. It's a bit longer, just for
Yes.
4 quatrains as opposed to two. But I enjoyed this poem, and I, I was unsure. There were a couple different poems I wanted to do, but I landed on this one, and I will be reading it now and discussing it afterwards. So we'll get into it. A Poison Tree by William Blake. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not, my wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears. And I sunned it with smiles and with soft, deceitful wiles. And it grew both day and night till it bore an apple bright. And my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine. And into my garden stole, when the night had veiled the pole. In the morning glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. All right. So we
Cool.
have A Poison Tree by
Uh-huh.
William Blake.
Hmm.
Knee jerk reactions, Justin?
Yeah, this is one of my favorites as well.
Mm,
I had this in a book. I had this book that I got when I was like when I think I might have been 21. And I had it was an anthology, had some William Blake poems, it had a lot of songs of experience and songs of innocence, right? So this was like one of my favorites. I actually forgot it though, because I lended it. So I haven't gotten the book back, you know.
mm,
And I went on a search for this poem at one time and thought it was by Robert Frost.
mm,
And then found it, a few years later, and was like, oh yeah, it was by William Blake. This is one of those ones, it kind of shaped my kind of thought a little bit because I I would not tell my friends if I was upset with them or tell people I was close to them if they had, upset me or maybe had bothered me, right? I'd let it go,
mm.
I'd just keep it quiet. And I realized through reading this poem that I would be treating my friends like enemies then. Like if they are my friend, I should let them know if I don't like something.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so that has been in the back of my mind really ever since, this poem
Mm,
like taught me like a little lesson about life to let people know when you're not happy.
right.
Because
Right.
otherwise,
Especially if
yeah.
you value the relationship.
Right, yeah, exactly. Because I'd be like, wow, I'm treating my friend right now like an enemy. Like I'm not telling them that I'm, unhappy about something. So it's.
because because a lot of people, when reading about this poem, a lot of people I've read, like, a lot of people saying that, like, the poem was, in a way, William Blake, like, did something, like, actively did something to the his foe. Like,
Mm,
he may have, like, I'm not sure, set a trap for him or done something, but I think the poem is much more subtle.
mm,
I think
mm,
it's much more subtle. I think the poison is something that is existing between the two people,
right,
and it
right.
has soured the relationship, which
Uh-huh,
is why the foe is dead beneath the tree.
right.
The foe is almost like, he's almost like become the fruit that fell from the tree. What fell from the tree is that the person has almost like become your foe, or because in your heart you didn't really, you were almost okay with him becoming a foe because you kept the wrath a secret.
Hmm. I think of it, yeah, I think of it a little bit like that. I think, maybe possibly something could have happened. I don't know that, if William Blake actually actively did anything to the person, but, I think in keeping it secret, obviously he allowed it to bloom to bring forth fruit, and
Mm-hmm.
it came to fruition. And that fruit, it could be anything. It could be an attitude. It could be, maybe it's something that you actually do, but, the fruit of it was seen by the enemy and they knew that his secret feelings had borne some kind of fruit, right?
Right.
Had reached some kind of expression,
Right.
and that it it ended the relationship. The person maybe is dead metaphorically, or kind of born dead, uh, sort of, yeah, metaphorically, and the relationship is now extinct,
Right.
is
I
now dead.
It's almost like, when the foe beheld it shine and he knew that it was mine, I view that as almost like they both almost like when there's someone that you know you both don't like each other,
Right.
but you're just sort of mutually around the same individuals.
Right.
And into my garden stole when the night had veiled the pole. The way I view that is the night when something happened that sort of made it so that feelings became aware. Like the night is a situation where
Uh-huh.
things that were beneath the surface were made
Right.
apparent.
Yes. Right.
So
Right.
like that I view it as like because there's been people who I'm cordial with, I don't really like,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
with just the slightest provocation,
Mhm. Mhm.
we have a
Yeah.
full blown argument
Mhm.
because I didn't like them from the beginning and they knew
Mhm.
I didn't like them. We knew we
Right.
didn't like each
Right.
other.
Yes. Right.
So that's when the night had veiled the pole.
Mhm.
Just
Mhm.
something that is to everything else is just a casual
Mhm.
darkness. Is just the slightest provocation necessary for the situation to reach critical mass, so to speak.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
And in the morning, when the dust had settled,
Clarification. Yeah.
I see my foe. He's stretched out beneath the tree. He's stretched out beneath what grew
Mhm.
from maybe a slight
Yeah.
thing.
Mhm. Right. That I think one thing too with this poem is that what he's describing is a process, like a natural process, something
Mm,
that will come about. Because the thing is, at the beginning, he had an issue with his friend. He told his friend it ended. He's angry with his friend. I told my wrath did end. It's because he was angry with his phone. He told it not. My wrath did grow.
mm,
I think there's a lesson there that if you had spoke up at the beginning, it would not have gotten to this point.
right,
And not that he's necessarily regretful of it.
right,
I don't think he regrets it. I don't think he is, kind of punishing himself for it or like, man, I shouldn't have done that.
right,
But
right.
this is how it happened. This is what happens.
He's looking back
It's
and he's
just,
realizing, there have been times in life where you realize, like, oh, me and Matt, if things had been
hmm
different, maybe we could have
yeah,
been
yeah,
buds,
right,
but
yeah, yeah.
because in a
Like,
way, that
hmm
person that is your foe,
hmm
they are similar to you.
hmm
You
hmm
have
hmm
similarities, but
hmm
just because of this, because of that, a bit
hmm
tongue, a stepped on
hmm
toe here and
Right.
there.
Yep, I've had it with people too.
Yeah,
Right,
right,
because there's a time before they were a foe,
right.
or like you see there was some time before you were angry with them. You were okay with them. Maybe they were
Mm-hmm.
your foe, but you were okay with them. And
Right.
you have like I've had this where I've had like little rivalries with people, that are
Exactly.
like, we're like in the same friend group or like, there's like for some reason something, we don't quite see eye to eye, or maybe we both for one reason or another, we're like maybe it's almost like a little bit of a social competitiveness, I
Mm-hmm.
think, in a way. Um, where like maybe you even, like maybe I'm not friends with that person anymore and I'm fine with it, but I don't necessarily wish them ill will, but I don't want to be friends with them. Like I
Right.
don't know. I'm not sure.
Exactly. I'm fine that it's over, but I'm honest. I'm like, he's able to be frank with himself. The poet is able
Hmm
to be honest with himself and say,
hmm
you know what? I wasn't completely innocent in that. Like, I nurtured, because it was watered in fears, night and
hmm
morning with my
Yep.
tears,
hmm
sunned with smiles and with soft deceitful wiles. I
Yeah.
imagine that is almost like imagining you getting the best of that person.
Uh-huh. 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 Yeah,
You
and you
know,
feel good about, like someone you love to hate.
right? Exactly.
Yeah, I've worked with people like this, in
Right.
work this happens often, I think. Um,
But then,
yeah.
whether a slip of the tongue or a word was said here or there or something got back
hmm
to someone, they realized your feelings. Your foe
hmm
realized your feelings,
Yeah.
and maybe the feeling was mutual. And like you said, it's not something that he's kicking himself. He's just understanding that, hey, that moment, that's when he realized that I didn't really care for him. And as soon as
hmm
there was
hmm
darkness, night. There's an expression in the 18th. I noticed it in a lot of poetry from the 19th century. They'll say like, black is the pole, or black, this is the pole. Like, I
mm,
guess they mean like the North Pole is darkened
mm,
by night. But
mm, mm.
it does say, well, in the morning glad I see my foe
Hmm.
outstretched
Right.
beneath the
Yeah.
tree. It's almost like he's he's fine with the way things turned out, but
Right.
he's
Right.
being
Yeah.
honest with himself. He wasn't
Hmm.
completely innocent.
Right.
There,
Right.
not
Yeah.
not only did he nurture the slight, there was a moment where he could have tore it out at the root.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think that's why this is like a song of experience, because you're
Mm,
looking back on your actions, you're seeing how they played out, you're seeing, because he watered it with fears,
right.
and tears, night and morning with my tears. He was, whatever it was, he was whining, crying about it. He was fearful of this person. Maybe they're talking crap about me. I don't
Right.
know what
Right.
it is.
Exactly.
And sunned it with smiles, like, yeah, I got the better of him there. You might have like
Mm-hmm.
little back and forths over time, like, yeah, I made him look like an idiot there. Yeah, I really showed her,
Right. Right.
and it kind of grows until, like, here's the fruit of it. It could be an argument. It could be like an all out, and I never liked you anyways.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why maybe like at the end, the foe stretched out beneath the tree. Maybe there's no relationship there anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
Maybe he's kind of glad, like, hey, they're not there anymore. But at the same time, he can see I wasn't completely innocent.
Yeah. It didn't have to be all that.
Right.
It didn't have to, I didn't have to take it there. Next time I probably won't do that again. Yeah.
And you know, a bit more cosmic. We also have duality featured. I mean, this was in
Mhm.
Songs of Experience. So, but
Mhm.
earlier Justin gave something from the Songs of Innocence. This
Mhm.
is a song of experience. So duality is
Right.
featured much in Blake's poetry, as we've mentioned.
Mhm.
It's also
Mhm.
featured here. I
Mhm.
was angry with my friend, told my wrath
Mhm.
my wrath did end. Angry with my foe, told it not my wrath did grow. It's almost like we almost have nursery rhyme esque a little bit
Mhm.
there.
Mhm. Yeah.
Watered it with fears, night and morning, water, sun. The water compared to the heat of the
Mhm.
sun, night and
Mhm.
morning.
Mhm.
It grew night and day, apple bright. Foe beheld it
Yep.
shine. That in the day he beheld it shine, but in the
Mhm.
night it killed him. So
Right. Right.
yeah, so
Yeah, it goes like this has like a little bit of a like story arc, that it
right,
follows.
exactly.
It's symmetrical, both in rhyme and in form.
Right,
I mean, it's in structure and in like sort of the idea of it.
right. And we have the you know, the AA, BB,
Hmm.
CC,
Hmm.
DD.
And perhaps we have, um, in the beginning we have forgiveness, and maybe in the end we have forgiveness of ourselves, perhaps maybe.
I
Um,
like that. Yeah.
because
Or at least coming
yeah,
to terms with
yeah,
ourselves.
yeah, yeah. I think this also, in the infant sorrow from Songs of Innocence, he's kind of a little bit more in the moment. He's not as reflective, you know,
Right.
where this is reflective in the Songs of Experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the Songs of Innocence, he was actively being, a fiend hid in a cloud. Here he's kind
Right.
of looking back and was like, yeah, I wasn't perfect.
And another motif that I see expressed in a lot of his poetry is, like sort of like, plant motifs.
Mm, mm-hmm.
And this sort of is like, it's like a tree, but it almost grows.
Yeah.
Like it sort of starts with a seed and sort of gets bigger and sort of grows. Infant sorrow from the Songs of Innocence is almost like a seed as well, like the seed of a
Mm-hmm.
child, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
whereas infant sorrow details like a tragedy is the seed doesn't, the baby is forced to give up at the end. This
Right.
is something that's this is a seed that sort of sprouts, grows, blooms,
Yes.
and
Yes.
even bears fruit.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, that's what we see in the beginning. We have the seed. The anger is the seed. In the
Right,
second stanza, it starts to grow. We see its growth. In the third
right,
stanza, it bears fruit. In the fourth stanza, we see what the result is of that
right.
fruit.
Almost the fruit hitting the ground,
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
foe outstretched beneath the tree both kind of rot. When
yeah,
fruits hit
yeah,
the ground, they start to
yeah.
rot. The foe,
Right.
we see,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So we always get that spring, summer, fall, winter,
Mhm. Mhm. Yep.
but and it may not be an exact one to one, but it's
No,
you
but the
know,
form is there. I mean, and that's how art imitates life.
right,
Is not just through it, talking about things that are real life, but even in their form and structure, they follow the same patterns that, the sun, moon, and stars do.
right,
Because these are patterns that we all experience.
embody.
Yes, that too. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I'll give it another read.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of A Poison Tree by William Blake. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not, my wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears. And I sunned it with smiles, and with soft, deceitful wiles. And it grew both day and night, till it bore an apple bright. And my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine. And into my garden stole, when the night had veiled the pole. In the morning glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree.
Yep. It's all time
So,
stuff. All right,
so
folks.
A Poison Tree by William Blake.
hmm
And William Blake, not only through his poetry, through his paintings as well, he really gives us cosmic imagery.
hmm
Cosmic imagery. He places us in this world and places things above us, below us, all around us. There is mystery in the world, regardless of Isaac Newton and all his measurements,
hmm
you know.
hmm hmm
Um,
Which is, yeah, funny how both of them are like, in their own ways, kind of devout Christians, right? Isaac Newton, buried um, what was it, in Abbey, uh, what Abbey is that? Famous Abbey in
I can't think
over
of it.
there in London. But he's buried in that famous abbey. Dies a virgin. He's almost like he is, structured Christianity. As much as now we'd like to say Isaac Newton and his theory of gravity, somehow like undermined God. He is at the time representative of like the political machine of Christianity. Like, he's like corporate, where
Mm,
William Blake is this like mystical, Christianity that is, often the individual, he's outside of society. He's like one crying in the wilderness, that
mm-hmm.
especially later in life when he's born in London, but then moves out into the countryside. So um, yeah, it's just kind of it's funny how you have both come from the
Right,
same culture.
right. And that is an interesting dichotomy to see. I mean, they both are Christian, but one is sort of a Christianity of what we can know about God's creation,
hmm
and one is sort of
hmm
a Christianity of God's creation being ultimately unknowable,
hmm hmm
which is sort of we've talked about Sigmund Freud, we've talked about Carl Jung,
hmm
a proto intimations of things like the unconscious are some sort of space where archetypes can exist, and William Blake very much has forged a space of archetype in some of his epic writings and
hmm
you know some of his paintings.
Right.
and even
Yeah.
some of his poetry, but it's also a very human experience in his
Hmm.
poetry. So
Yep.
like romantics, they place humans into a cosmology, and not just a habitat.
Yeah. 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 That is true. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot more that could be said on William Blake. We've barely scratched the surface. And there's a reason, for those of you who haven't read him or haven't gotten into him, there's a reason why he's considered right at the top. I think we've given two pretty good examples, but the songs of innocence and songs of experience really accessible. And his poetical sketches, which is like his first book, but his like later stuff, if you want to get into like esoterica and like you know even like Paradise Lost level of like
Epic
iconography, yeah, and
storytelling.
epic storytelling. He kind of does it all, so like yeah, if you like the Lord of the Rings, read some of his epics works, like your Uriel.
And it and it I'm pretty sure it's all in the public domain. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I believe
it
so.
should
I
all
mean,
be
he's yes, yeah,
it should all be free.
right,
So
yeah,
take advantage.
right, yeah, exactly. Well, man, you got any who are we seeing next week? Do a little
Okay,
preview for next
a little preview for next time makes perfect sense. Let's see who we have. I think it's a more contemporary poet.
mm-hmm,
Next week
mm-hmm.
we have, after William Blake, we have Theodore Rothke.
Yes, that's awesome. Yeah.
Theodore Rothke.
Yep, a
So
little
a
bit
bit
more
more
contemporary,
contemporary. Yep.
19th century or 20th century writer. So that'll be yeah. He's an all he's got some great stuff too, so I'm looking forward to that. He's got a couple favorites. So that'll be a good episode.
Indeed, indeed.
All
So
right. Well,
hey, great episode. I feel
hey,
like William Blake's great. Check him
yeah,
out. Take
yeah.
advantage.
William Blake. Hey, and like, subscribe,
Get in the
comment,
comments.
get in the conversation, you
And
know.
I'm just freestyling here. If there's anybody that sees this, if there's anybody that wants to, if you send us your poetry,
Oh,
verse
okay.
take at
Okay.
gmail.com,
Okay.
we'll do an episode on
We'll do it. We'll
somebody's
do it.
poetry. We'll
I'm
read
I'm
it,
down. I'm down. You
because
just said
we
it.
let's 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 engage with you guys. Come on, some
Right.
engage. Let's,
But
if you send
yeah,
in a poem, we'll read it. We'll read it. Send
yeah,
in a
but
poem and a blurb.
mm-hmm. I
We
think
will
we're
read
just
it.
freestyling here, but it would be good to add at the end of an episode something from the audience.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Maybe
it just
we
hit
won't
you.
do a full episode on you.
Right, right,
Maybe
right,
we'll.
right.
Maybe we will.
If
I
it
don't
knocks
know.
our socks off, we will.
Right, yeah. And even if it
You
doesn't,
gotta, yeah, you gotta send us a couple more.
No.
If it's really bad, well, no, just kidding.
No.
If it's really bad, we'll politely do it at the end. But
No, 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 I
but
think we should do anyone's. Yeah.
yeah,
But hey, we'll talk about that. We'll figure that
right,
out. But
right. But
that's an
like,
idea.
the email is versetake@gmail.com.
Yep, yep. All
So
right.
feel so hey,
And I'm Justin,
and I'm James.
and
Signing
we'll
off.
see you next time.
We've been Versetake. All right, that was that.
All right.
Yeah, I freestyled that at the end, but hell, I think that'd be good. Like if they send us, email it. I might do a little TikTok and say,